Hello, this is Ken O'Neill with Stan Brooks for our Cosmic Konversations channel. Um, we're going to talk about communication, and we mean that in sort of a broad way as far as how people communicate these days and how this can be causing a lot of issues around the world. And we'll get into more detail about that here in a moment. So I'm going to let Stan pick up the ball here for a minute. Go ahead, Stan.
Okay, as Ken just mentioned, we're calling this Cosmic Conversations, and the meditation aspect of it does come into mind. So, what I'd like to do is invite us for a just short meditation for about 30 seconds to 1 minute to kind of clear our minds. Okay, so I will say begin and I will say finish. Okay, so ready and begin. All right, finish. Okay, now we're continuing our conversation regarding the communication among individuals as well as groups in this particular day. And we want to really maintain the focus on uh, the happenings that are occurring today with all the challenges that people are meeting, their everyday problems, their issues on all different levels, be it personal relationships, be it in business, the career, and whatnot. There are many challenges that we're meeting today because of the upheaval that we're going through in terms of stabilizing our economy, stabilizing our political system. You can see there's a lot of tension, more so probably than any other time because of all the variables, all the different ideologies, all the different perspectives. So the principle is that how do you engage someone who has an opposite, okay, opinion or viewpoint or perspective on a particular topic? Something particularly also that they may take on a very personal level. They may have a great deal of passion about. And Ken and I, we like to talk more from a personal standpoint. So again, keep in mind that these are all our personal opinions based on our own experiences. So if it helps in any way, we are happy. And if not, then again, you can just listen just for the information. But on a personal level for myself, I find out it's good to have a sensitivity when you engage someone in something that they're speaking very passionately about. So the ability to listen is very important. A lot of times when we hear something contrary, we want to respond. That's our natural instinct, you know. And we do this defensively always in many things in society because we don't like to be what we call quote unquote on the bottom end or the loser. We always want to take the offensive to at least equal the playing field. But I've experienced that it's good to just be receptive and listen to people so that you understand where they're coming from. And even though you may not agree with their ideals or their viewpoints, at least you can get a feel of why they have these viewpoints. And in that way, sometimes they can steer and guide you to be able to respond on a respective level. And this is one thing I find is very lacking nowadays. When people engage in conversation uh, in these troubling times, they lack a lot of what I would call just common respect. So the ideal is either to dominate or to either control the conversation. And there's really no need to do so because in the short time you're going to be speaking, you shouldn't try to change anyone's opinion. There's no sense in that anyway because they spent their whole life developing their belief systems and their opinions. So just ride with it. Just try to understand
Yeah, that's good. I mean, we're in the realm now that's talked about a lot, which is the manipulation of news. Remember when we were young? I mean, there were high journalistic standards that news commentators had to follow, or heck, they'd be cut off. I mean, they could lose their jobs if they tried to manipulate or put too much personal opinion in when they're supposed to be reporting facts. Now, oftentimes, you'll hear these guys just throwing their opinion out, all the time. And that's dangerous and that's bad because you're like, well, where in this guy's opinion or this gal's opinion or the actual facts of whatever incident or event that we're trying to look at here? That's one of the things that bothers me. And then you have the extreme right people who are saying, well, that's fake news. And then you'll have the extreme left people who are saying, well, no, that's fake news. And then that gets people pretty confused. They sit there and they think, well, in the middle of all this, what are the actual basic core facts before somebody puts their political or religious spin on it, and that's I see that as one of the major problems, and it fits in with what you said, it's people just want to be right rather than what are the facts of the incident. You see this all the time. Now, on the other end of the fence here, in a more positive way, what I do really notice, because I engage with this daily, on platforms like YouTube, or in China, it's called Bilibili. That's their version of YouTube. What'll happen is, and this is the really plus side of the internet, is all these younger folks in particular will meet on these various platforms like Ome TV, or they'll just create their YouTube channel and they'll put up what they want to talk about. And I'm noticing that more and more now what's happening is they're really getting interested in people around their age that live in other cultures, in other countries. And they have this free exchange because this stuff doesn't even cost them anything to do. I mean, if they own a smartphone or a computer, they're not paying. I mean, think about when we were teenagers. If you wanted to talk to somebody in the Philippines, you had to do it by telephone. And back then it could cost you a few minutes, could be $100, which would be about $1,000 in today's money. So people weren't doing that stuff much. Now you can do it for free. It's great. So I noticed that I think what this is starting to do is when you can talk to somebody on the street who lives, say, in Beijing, right? And say, what's really going on over there? Because we hear all this stuff through our news sources that, all these horrible things are the only things happening. And then you'll watch these younger folks talk and they'll say, well, yeah, there's some of that, but that's this one little area over here where this is happening. But where I live in my part of China, we're not having it, and folks need to realize that these things aren't just universal, where the entire Chinese government is not giving people any freedom whatsoever. And, I gather that their government really tracks everything they do and it's quite well known. But at the same time, they're not controlling every little thing they do, like stopping them from having conversations with people around the world. The reason I bring this up is I think this is one of the really positive things that's going on communication wide, that it starts with simple conversations like, oh, I want to practice my Mandarin. Oh, okay, well, I want to practice my English. And next thing you know, you have somebody from New York who's talking to somebody in Chengdu in China, and they're having these fantastic conversations, and they get really comfortable with each other quickly, and they first start talking about food, or they start talking about differences in the language, and one thing leads to another, and the conversations start to expand, and they immediately trade information, like on WhatsApp or WeChat, where they can have personal conversations, and it seems like it's opening up another whole avenue of communication that we have not really seen before. And I think this has a lot of potential for changing a lot of stuff, because people can watch news stories and say, well, I just watched your news channel coming out of New York and it says that this is going on. And they go, well, I'm living right in the middle of it. And it's like, yeah, there's some of that, but it's not as exaggerated as your news channel says it is. See, because I'm going to give you more of the whole picture. I think that's an important phenomena that's happening, and I'm getting a big kick out of watching this. It's like the younger folks are realizing that, well, let's just talk to people directly there and see what they have to say.
Yeah, it's a phenomena that we're so blessed to witness, because even through all the confusion and chaos, we're lucky enough to be witnessing what I call the paradigm change, the change of consciousness, where we're actually able to sit back, be more receptive, be more respectful. But I'm going to interject something really quick here. Let's take 30 seconds to clear our mind, because there's something I want to add to what Ken has just been speaking about. Okay, so again, I'll say begin and finish. So just relax. Okay, begin. Okay, finish. It's very important to be able to ride this wave and also not just ride it, in other words, to survive it, but understand how it is working. You know, we've made such a technological jump in the last 100 years is phenomenal. Many people have said without if it wasn't for a lot of political barriers that were set in place, we'd be even 100 years more advanced. So I think the technology is kind of ahead of us, and we're being used by the technology rather than us using the technology. Technology is using us rather than the opposite. So we have to kind of catch up and use this technology, know how it works, and make the better use for it. Okay, because we're all basically the same. We have different cultures and those factions of our society. Unfortunately, we do have these factions, these groups benefit from keeping us divided and separate, highlighting our differences rather than uniting us with what's similar. Okay. I have a joke that I usually use with this. Say, you know, we have so many different ways of preparing our meals and actually, you know, using the utensils to eat. Some people use their bare hands. Some people use chopsticks. Some people use knife and fork or whatever. But there's no one who has a different manner of chewing food and swallowing it and digesting it. So without that last aspect of it, there's no purpose in eating at all. Okay. So when we look at humanity, we're all the same when it comes to the things that are most important. We're all the same when it comes to things that are most important. So that's the ideal, to find out what unites us as a group, because unless we come together, it's going to be very difficult, maybe even impossible to solve all the issues that we're dealing with right now. Okay. Because we keep bringing up the past. And if you do so, you're going to think like they did 30, 40 years ago. But this time now, you have to change your way of thinking. You have to be more open. And I mean, just not intellectually, but I mean, even from the heart, compassionately. So Ken mentioned something very important. These people are very curious, particularly the young people. You know, how do you guys live? What's your culture? What's your history? Particularly find out, inquire about history, because history has been so distorted because it gives you sort of a stereotypical perspective where you lock people in and say, oh, these people have this in Africa. Like when I grew up in school, the teacher, you know, would teach European history. And when some of the black kids would ask, well, what about African history? They would just come out and say, there's no such thing as African history. So it kind of keep you perplexed. Say, what? This huge continent has had no history. So what's going on here? So it's the whole thing about, you know, knowing, you know, what unites us. You know, everybody contributes in the world, man. So, but like again, what I stated on a personal standpoint, I think listening is very important, particularly if you practice meditation. Learn how to be receptive with people. Learn how to work and exercise your awareness, your sensitivity, your perceptionist. Be willing to give in, even though it may look like that you're weak. It may look like that you know, you're not as knowledgeable, but be courageous enough to do that so you can really take in the information and you can learn their perspective. You learn where it comes from. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was just having a thought here a minute ago. Yeah, I mean, let's look at how people aren't communicating. Look at all this crazy, weird stuff going on in our politics right here in the U.S. It's insane. You know, I think when I look at it from the outside, the idea that okay, you have these two major parties. Any other independents or parties make almost no difference whatsoever because they don't have a snowball's chance in hell because all the big money's with the two major parties, right? And the whole idea of having these parties is to me antiquated because one's conservative and one's more liberal. And then within those, you have the people that are more moderate and the people that are more extreme under the umbrella of what those basic parties represent. Well, that in itself is so divisive by nature. And it's gotten worse, it's gotten worse, I'd say, especially in the last 10 years, you watch both of these political parties and they seem to spend more time trying to show that everything about the other party is wrong and that theirs is the right one. And they're so hung up on the battles that it's no wonder they can't get anything done. It used to be in the old days, a Republican and a Democrat would be on the floor and they might be passionately arguing their side. And then at the end of the session, they walk across the street to the bar and they have a couple of martinis and they have dinner and they're friends. And then they come back and they go through this for so many days and they would used to meet in the middle. And that's how it was designed to work. Doesn't seem like that's happening enough anymore. It's just we're right and you're wrong. and you know, these old systems in place, they're not keeping up with the times. And I think that's a big part of why they're failing. You know, they're not keeping up with the times, you know. So I think that these huge entities are one of the problems. They get so tied up in their own rhetoric and their own fear too. It's their fear that makes them not want to stay open, like Stan just mentioned, and really hear what the other side's saying and say, well, how can we compromise? I don't hear that word compromise much anymore when it comes to the political parties. You just don't hear it much, you know, not enough anyway. So there's all that going on. So that's why I'm always back to the independence notion. You know, it's going to have to be, I think, individual people who talk to each other and really, like you keep saying, it's smart. They have to really learn how to listen and put their own opinion aside for a minute and just hear where the other person's coming from. Because if you can hear that, and then you can go, oh, well, I see where they're coming from, and I see why that I don't live their way, or I don't live their life, so I didn't see it that way. Then that sets the ground to be more like, in some ways, like the older days where people would figure out, well, how do we, let's say we're back to the two-party idea, how do we come together in the middle and compromise and create something that everybody can accept? We've got to get back to that mentality. That's the part of the past that makes sense to me, you know. And so how do we make that happen? That's a tricky one there, because we still have to work within the realm of what we have. You know, I feel like a lot of times when I vote, I'm not necessarily voting for the person I think's the strongest. I'm voting to make sure I vote against the one that I can see is the weakest or the most dangerous. And that's a shame when that's how you have to vote. I've seen independents. I saw a really brilliant doctor, a female in the Green Party. This was sometime back during Obama, maybe the first time around, and she was brilliant. I mean, made more sense to me than any presidential candidate I had heard in a long time, because it was more balanced all the way down. And it's like, well, this lady has no chance in hell of getting in, because she's not in one of the two major parties. So, you know, so I'm just looking at it from that whole major example of poor communication that we have now. And it's poor communication based on not wanting to hear what the other person or people are really saying. It's back to what Stan just said a little while ago on a huge, huge level.
Well, this is why Ken and I really appreciate the scientific, methodology, because when you pick up a product that's been created or developed from research, you got to really think how much failure went into the research and development of this product. So you see that the science whittles away what doesn't work to find out what works, but you have to go through the process of finding out what doesn't work so that you can find out what works. But like he mentioned, in the political system, it's such a rush that you don't want to show any sign of weakness. And so you're not going to, if you don't find out what doesn't work, you're not going to find out what's worked. There's an old saying that said, if there was no fools, there would be no wisdom. So we need to have these errors so that we can whittle away. But I think if we come to the ideal that, like Ken just mentioned about the old way being more balanced, if we can extract from the old and create what is new, then we will have a good direction to go in. You know, you just don't want to throw away the past entirely, but you want to use the things that are productive, what's positive. But then again, you want to create something new. So I think we're in the process of creating something new, but in this process of being innovative and creative, or having to be creative and innovative, makes some people feel very insecure. Because in order to go through this process, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make errors because it's a brainstorming thing. So you have to be more vulnerable. You have to be willing to say, okay, let's revamp this thing and really innovate and discover and create something that's perfectly new that's going to fit what we need for today. So that's the generic understanding. But like we mentioned personally, just be more receptive, try to listen more. And when you practice different ways of listening, there's different levels. Sometimes you reach a level where you understand the emotional content behind what a person is saying. That really keys in on the fact, no wonder they're so passionate about this, because they're emotionally attached to it, which could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing, right? But you start to respect that because you realize, well, I'm passionate about some things too. So instead of butting heads like this, let me understand more, and then we'll find something. But I think in the end of the day, we have to develop a framework whereby we can coexist as a nation, regardless of our differences. We need to find those similarities whereby we can coexist as a nation. Right now, we're on the pathway of destroying the nation because we're fighting. There's too much fighting all over the place. It's too much fighting.
Yeah, see, Stan and I were around in the 60s, and we thought that all this had kind of been worked out a lot more by the time we got into the 70s. And then here it is. It's like the whole thing going again. And, and it started with all the racial differences, and it looked like it had really opened up, and that seemed to last for a while, and then that just went bye-bye, and now we're back to that nonsense again too. So I don't know. Unfortunately, it's well, or maybe fortunately, it's going to take all you younger folks who are coming up now and starting to move in the direction of being the people running things that are going to have to figure out what's it going to take. And maybe it's as simple as now there's a bunch of people popping up on their Facebook Messenger or on one of these conversational platforms that start off with kids playing games together online around the world, and then they start to talk, and next thing you know, I notice a lot of these folks that do this, they'll get so engaged that they'll actually eventually physically fly to one of the countries where they've been talking to people, and they get into their culture and they get into their food, and maybe that's what it's going to take, folks meeting face to face, that never would have before, so well, we're going to be running out of time here in a few minutes, so we probably should do our little wrap up comments at this point. So what else do you have to say, Stan, about this subject?
Well, I think it's good. It's a good time to wrap things up because we've covered pretty much the total base, the general aspect of it as well as the personal, individual aspect of it. But the ideal is that we need to develop a mental stability where we can survive all of this chaos and not take it so personal. Be able to witness what's going on. How can we make things better, not for just your family, but for the entire spectrum? Because we're all really one family globally. That's why we have problems that are affecting us globally. So unless we come together as a family mindset, we're not going to really resolve these issues. We can't do it by nation because we're too interrelated now. We're past that point that we have to unite in order to be able to even come up with innovative ideas to even apply to make things better. So the ideal is to try to develop a positive attitude. Don't let things get on top of you. When things get on top of you, do what you need to do to relax, to get your balance back. Look at things as objectively as you possibly can, and maintain your basic balance. Okay, and I think it'll be fine. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's that word compromise keeps popping into my head. It just keeps tapping on the inside of my skull, that this is what folks just don't seem to like to want to do anymore. There's a bizarre stubbornness going on, and I hate to say this, but a lot of times it's because of people's fundamental religious beliefs too. Sometimes that can keep people pretty narrow, when they feel like their religious system has all the answers, and it's exclusive. It doesn't allow some religions don't allow for any variation. And so I'm going to stick my neck out here and say that's pretty darn antiquated too. That doesn't fit the world anymore, because what it's going to come down to, if that's the case, is which religion has more powerful weapons. That's the religion that'll win. I mean, the way things are portrayed and the way they go these days. So I'm just hoping that folks get out of being stuck in that merry-go-round as well. It's I don't know how to tell people to do it. Like you said, you just when you meditate, you connect in a way that's just beyond your your personal thinking. And it opens you to a lot more that's possible and it's going on with other people. But that's a topic we'll have to get into another day on what that can do for you and how you can use your meditation to make you more open. That's important as well, I would say.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, well, we're going to sign off, guys. So we're going to try to get this going on a little more regular basis here, and I'll get this up on YouTube here as soon as I can, and we will officially sign off now. Thanks for those of you who've spent
All right.
time listening.
Thank you, everybody.